Okay, today's daf is the second to last daf of Ketubot, daf Kuf Yud Aleph. Please join us at the Shiur on Wednesday. If you haven't yet registered to get your Zoom link, please register. Shiur will be Wednesday night. If you're in Israel and want to join a Shiur in Israel, there's on Tuesday night, that's tonight. There's also on Thursday night in Jerusalem and Modi'in. There's also a bunch more that went up now. There's in the Shomron area. There's in Alon Shvut. There's in hopefully at Frat. I think they're not final yet on their date, and Yerucham and lots of places. Okay, we are going to get started. So we ended our daf with these very important statements of how important it is to live in Israel. And we're going to continue along these lines. There's many things to say about everything we're going to talk about. It's a super long daf, so I'm not going to be able to go in depth into too much. Luckily, there's Shuli Mishkin this week on Flashback, which went up this morning. I think it's already up, which is all about Israel in general, about the stuff. And Gethet is about specifically the three oaths that we're going to get to, which is the central topic of today's daf and something that came up. I'm going to have trouble not talking about it at all, but I will try to keep it brief so that we have time to get through things. But definitely listen to Gethet this week. It's not up yet. It'll be up later this morning. It's really, it goes through a whole excellent summary of the issues that we're going to talk about very briefly. Okay, we start off with a story. So we ended with really important to live in Israel, right? This is, as people said before class, right? This is the aliyah daf. This is all about why we should live in Israel, and it's even going to continue into the last daf. The beauty of Israel, the importance of living there. We ended yesterday with these statements about living in Israel is like, right, even if you're living among Gentiles, it's still living in Israel is like you're living with God, okay? It's like you have this closer connection to God, and obviously there were the negative statements. Today we're going to focus more on the positive language rather than the negative that we ended with yesterday, right? That living in Chutz La'aretz is as if you have no God, right? Even if you live in a big Jewish community. Anyway, we're going to leave that statement for now. So, Rabbi Zeira, in light of all this, Rabbi Zeira wants to make aliyah, which makes perfect sense based on what we've been seeing. However, you might remember we've come across this before, that before he went to make aliyah, to Rav Yehuda, he avoided his Rebbe, Rav Yehuda. Why? To buy because he wanted to make aliyah, and to Amar Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda held. You are transgressing a positive commandment if you make aliyah from Babylonia to Israel. Shenema, where does he get it from? It's not an amei in the Torah, but it's an amei that he learns out from the following verse. Okay, it's a verse from Yirmiyahu. Bavela yuvahu, you will be taken to Babylonia. It's Jeremiah talking about what's going to happen in the destruction of the temple. V'shama yiyu, and there you will be ad yom puktiatchem nu Hashem, ad yom puktiotam, and you will be there until I bring you back. Basically, who decides when we go back? God, not us. For Rabbi Zeira, how did he explain it? He said that's not the way we understand that pasuk. Hu b'klei sharet ktiv. The context of that verse is not talking about the Jewish people will be taken to Bavel the way Rabbi Yehuda understood it. It's talking about the vessels that we used in the temple will be taken away and will not be returned until God brings them back. Okay, so that's fine. He's dealt with that. But Rabbi Yehuda, what does he say? He finds another pasuk, and here comes the famous. Tiv krafrina. Hishbati etchem benot Yerushalayim b'tzvaot ubeilot hasadeh v'gomer. Okay, this is in Shir HaShirim, which is all an allegory according to most, right? It's about two lovers, and it's an allegory to the relationship between God and the Jewish people. So here it says, I've sworn you in the Benot Yerushalayim, Bitzvaot ubeilot hasadeh, and the deer and the rams of the fields. The current translation is the hinds. The continuation of the pasuk is, what's the oath? It doesn't tell you the main part. If you wake up and awaken the love until I want it. Basically meaning God is in charge of deciding when this love relationship will go back to where it was, and we will go back to Israel. That's how he understands that verse, which means that you can't go to Israel on your own. You can't just decide to make aliyah. Right, which is very surprising in light of what we just saw yesterday and the importance of it. Wait till you see some statements later that Rabbi Yehuda is going to say about Babylonia. It's very interesting. So you have to remember who what he held about this, and it's going to affect why he says what he says later. Through Rabbi Zeira, what does he do with that verse? Hahu shelo ya'alu Yisrael b'choma is a very big line. Okay? He says that verse is coming to say that the Jews shouldn't go up as a wall. What does that mean? Rashi explains, and here there's different interpretations. Rashi says, the first line in Rashi at the end of the line, Yachad b'yad chazakah. You can't go as a group, en masse, and with strength, meaning with force, fighting against other nations. Okay, so you can't go as a huge group of people with force fighting against your enemies. Okay, now this everybody agrees. Not everybody agrees with Rav Yehuda. Individuals can make aliyah, but this statement some people do take la halacha. Okay, and this is where we listen to Geffen all about all the different interpretations. It became a huge issue when the state was created. Right? Some people say it's not b'yad chazakah because the UN decided that it was fine, or the Balfour Declaration, or right. There's all sorts of ways to say that. We didn't go up forcefully. Now it's true there was a war after. Right? It's difficult how to explain it. Some people say Choma is to build a fortified wall, and that's not what we did. There's all different ways to explain this. We didn't go berov, right? Maybe we went a lot of people. What a lot of people is anyway. There's many different interpretations. Obviously, the Niture Karta, the Satmar took this literally, and were very against going back to Israel, and said this is not Beseder, right? This is exactly what the oath is. Some people say this is just a drasha. This was never meant to be halacha. Okay, I knew I wasn't going to get away without explaining any of these things, but it's a fascinating topic. I'll give you one more in another minute when we finish with the 3 oaths. Okay, so Rav Yehuda, but definitely recommended to listen to Geffen. It's much more explained in all the different opinions. Rabbanit El Shimoni does a great job really explaining all and reading some of the stuff inside. Rav Yehuda, what does he say? Okay, so now Rabbi Zeira says this is shalayel b'choma. It's for a group, not for individuals. So what's Rabbi Yehuda going to say? Hishbat yachrinakti. This verse is found in 3 places in Shir HaShirim. Parak Bet, Parak Zayin, Parak Gimel, and I think it's Parak Chet, or Zayin. Okay, now the almost exact pasuk appears 3 times. So he says, there's another one. One is for the group, and one is for individuals. Through Rabbi Zeira, what will he say to that? No, what are you talking about? It's not for group individuals. It's for these famous 3 oaths of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Chanin. He's the one who said this. What are these? What's the purpose of the 3 oaths that are mentioned in Shir HaShirim? That's what we just explained. The second one, we are not allowed to have a big rebellion against the other nation. Number 3, one of the oaths wasn't even for us, it was for the other nations so that they don't subjugate us too much, which is why some people say, why I waited to give this answer, once the Holocaust happened and they broke, right, the Umot HaOlam obviously subjugated us more than necessary, and therefore the oaths are no longer, right, these oaths kind of go together. And if they don't keep their part, then we don't have to keep our part. That's another way to say it. Interesting that we end with oaths, because we're about to go into Masechet Nedarim, which is all about vows, which are not so much different than oaths. Although they are different, we will see how. The Rav Yehuda. Where's Rav Yehuda? If he must hold by these 3 oaths also, then where does he get? Then he's not left with another oath left for individuals. So into Ilu ve'imta Orahu, there's a double language here. It says if you awaken and if you awaken, right? So one is to wake up and one is to wake up others. So from the double language, we say, individuals and group. The Rabbi Zeira, what does he do with the double language? We're always familiar with the 3 oaths, that's the most famous, but there's actually 6. In other words, because each one has double language. So the 3 that we said, that you will not reveal when the Mashiach is going to come. We have a lot of talk of Mashiach later, and Tchiyat HaMeitim, resurrection of the dead in today's daf. Number 1, don't reveal the secret. Anyone who does know, like if the prophets who knew, we're not allowed to say when the final redemption will be. Shalot yirchaku et haket. Some people say yidchiku. Okay, that I'm not going to get into the differences, but one interpretation is that you don't sin and therefore push off the ultimate redemption. You don't reveal the secret to the Gentiles. What's secret? It's a big secret. Nobody really knows. Some people say it's the Sod HaIbor, how to do the calendar. Some people say it's Sodot HaTorah, okay, like the reasons behind things. Unclear exactly what this Sod is. What are animals doing in that verse? Rabbi Elazar, keep to the oath, great. If you don't keep the oath, I'm going to basically, right, your flesh is going to be strewn like like those who live in the field, the animals, you're going to end up like the animals, and your bodies are just going to be thrown in the fields. Okay, so again, whether this is meant to be halacha is a very good question. Okay, obviously Rabbi Yehuda thought it was meant to be halacha, and that's why he was all upset with Rabbi Zeira that he was going on aliyah. But again, he wasn't even talking about the 3 shvuot. He was talking about something that derived from those verses, right? Whereas Rabbi Zeira and obviously many others made aliyah, and that seems to not be such an issue. The question is shelo yalu b'choma halacha or not, and how do we grapple with that? Right? This was, some people claim that it was the redemption. That it was the redemption, right? Because obviously the biggest question in this whole thing is how are we going to know when God wants it, right? We don't have direct communication with God anymore. So anyway, lots of interesting, it's a very fascinating sugya. We're moving on though. Amal Rabbi Elazar, we're going to see Rabbi Elazar a lot today. If you remember, he was a student of Rabbi Yochanan. He lived in Israel, which again, it's important to think about where people lived in terms of connecting with their statements. So he said, Kol hadar be'eretz Israel sharoi b'lo avon. If you live in Israel, you have no sins. Anyone living in Israel, right? This sounds great. Shene'amal ubal yomar shachen chaliti ha'am yoshev b'nesu avon. Don't say that people. So now, how exactly you translate this? But chaliti, the people are sick, and that maybe if we go there, it will be bad for us. Ha'am yoshev b'nesu avon. God basically, all their sins are atoned for by living. Amalei Rav Ashi. Okay, I don't have time today to quote where every pasuk is taken from, so you could just look it up. If you have a comment, usually the Torah or on the side tells you all the verses, and a Gemara should have that. Okay, moving on. Amalei Rav Ashi. Rav had a different interpretation of that verse. Again, he wasn't living in Eretz Israel, so he had a different way. Because if you want to atone for sins, it says our suffering, our chalaim, when we're sick, that itself atones for our sins, right? It's often a Jewish theme that suffering is a way of atoning for sins. Amar Ravanan. Now we get to burial in Israel. Okay, so for those in Chutz La'aretz who want to be buried in Israel, here's your source. Okay, even though there's going to be a small caveat about it soon. Ravanan says, Kol HaKavor be'eretz Israel ki'ilu kavor tachat hamizbeach. If you're buried in Israel, it's like you're buried under the altar. Where do we get that from? K'tiv hacha mizbach adama ta'aseh li. That's the commandment to build the mizbeach. It's called the mizbach adama, of the ground. U'chtiv hatam v'chiper adma to'amo, that the ground atones for when they're dead, and therefore we learn from here that the ground of Israel will atone for the sins, like the altar. So Ula lived in Babylonia, but went all the time to Israel. Unfortunately, when he died, he was outside of Israel. Rabbi Elazar, they told Rabbi Elazar, and his reaction was, Amal, Ant Ula, you Ula, of all people, Aladamat me'at tamut, you're going to die you died on impure ground. Okay, if you look at the context of that pasuk, it's all pasuk that describes in Amos the terrible things that are going to happen. Your wife will go to prostitution. Your sons and daughters will die by the sword. Your land will be divided up by other people. And you will die on impure land. So it's a pretty bad verse. And this is what he's saying, I can't believe, Ula, this happened to you. Right? It's what they're basically saying is it's bad to die not in Israel. Amrulo, Aronoba, but they said, but they're bringing him here to be buried. So that sounds great. Amar lahem, he said to them, Eino domeh kol hatato mechayim lekol hatato la'achar mita. Okay, so now we say it's not the same to die in the land than it is to live in the land. Okay, so for all those who want to get buried, it's amazing, right? It's important, but it's not the same as living. That's what I said. This is the aliyah. Hahu gavra, even though, right, what's interesting is we started with how great aliyah is, then we said, maybe you're not allowed to make aliyah, and then we went back to praising the land of Israel. Hahu gavra, the nafla yivama bechozan. He was living in Israel, and he had a yibum, yivama. His brother died in Bechozai. If you remember, that's some out there place in Bavel. It's always far from the mainland. That's not really important for this story. Until the Kamei to Rabbi Hanina. He went to Rabbi Hanina and said, what to do? Should I go there? And do Yibam marry her and stay there with her? Amarle. So he said, should I go down there and do Yibam? Amarle. He says him very harsh. Okay, you see how people felt very strongly about these things. Rabbi Hanina says, Achiv nasa kutit, your brother married kutit, which is usually considered the way we call a non-Jewish woman, even though she was Jewish. Okay, he's basically saying a woman who lived outside of Israel. You know, he married this woman who made and he died. Baruch hamakom sharago. Blessed is your brother that he died. In other words, he deserved death because he didn't live in Israel. That's already quite harsh. V'hu yereda harav, and you want to go after him? Again, he was using exaggerated language, which really wasn't so appropriate. I'm sure it didn't make him feel the person who doesn't have a name here didn't make him feel good about his brother. But he was basically saying, no way, no how should you go down there because you'll die also. Stay in Israel, okay? And obviously take care of chalitza, you know, don't leave her in Aguna, but don't go do Yibum there and stay there. Amal Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, we're back to Rav Yehuda, except here he's quoting Shmuel. Keshem she'asur letzei me'eretz Yisrael leBavel, kach asur letzei meBavel l'shar haaretz. We start to see now, wait a minute. Okay, we talked about this yesterday after class. You know, these are the Babylonians speaking. Well, the Babylonians have to also talk about the importance of Babylonia because that's where they're living. And not only that, the question is, what's so special about Israel? Is it Israel itself? Or is it that it was a place of Torah? So once you say it's a place of Torah, well, then Babylonia is also a place of Torah. So here come all the statements praising Babylonia and saying that basically, just like you can't leave Israel to go to Babylonia, it's all right, there's a hierarchy. You also can't leave Babylonia to go to other places because those places have no Torah there. Even to a smaller town in Babylonia where there's no rabbis. Forget about Babylonia to other lands, even within Babylonia. And in fact, there was a guy who did it. Shante Rav Yosef, you put him in excommunication. Okay, excommunicated him because of this. People say it's not a name of a place, it's just like it just means province. He left Pumbedita for a different province, Shchiv, and he died. Okay, this is again harsh language for, you know, don't leave a place of Torah, you might die. What happened here? Amar Abai, after he died, Abai said, if he wanted, have a chai. He could have lived. He could have stayed in Pumbedita and he wouldn't have died. Again, if you talk nowadays in this language, you really get people scream at you, right? This is not a good language to speak in. But again, it was a style. This is how they spoke. This is how they strengthened the opinions that they believed in. By making these harsh statements, they were trying to say, we view this as very important. Rabbi Rav Yosef to Amr Travayu, the kosher ones, we don't yet know what this means. The kosher ones in Babylonia, Eretz Yisrael will absorb them. The kosher ones, in other lands, Bavel will absorb them. Lemai. For what is this for? Besides a dough, what is a dough? It's mixed with lots of things. So if you want to say it's yuchsin, that basically, if you live in Bavel, we can assume you have good enough yichus to be in Babylonia, to get married in Eretz Yisrael. And if you live in other lands, you can get married yuchsin in Babylonia, but you can't say that because it's the opposite. It's kol haaretzot yisal Eretz Yisrael. Compared to Israel, the other lands, people don't have good yuchsin. And Eretz Yisrael is yisal Bavel. The people in Babylonia have the best yichus. Okay, they know their lineage much better. They're much more clean lineage. Whereas all the other places compared to there, it's a different level of it. Still the Shiur at the bottom, but Bavel and Israel switch. So therefore, it must be Lineage and Torah. Basically, if you're in Babylonia, you should go to Israel to get buried. If you're in the other lands, which basically means you're too far to get your body to Israel, then go bury at least in Babylonia, because again, it's got the Torah. It's not the land that's going to help you, but at least the Torah of the land will help you. Amal Rav Yehuda. Now we get to the statement I made mention of before that I wanted you to pay attention. Rabbi Yehuda now makes a very brash statement. Until now, we've been saying Israel is best, right? Babylonia is second best. Comes Rabbi Yehuda, who basically wouldn't let anybody move to Israel, said, Kol hadar beBavel ki'ilu dar be'eretz Yisrael. He puts it at the same level. It's basically like you're living in Israel. Okay? Interesting statement. Shne'emal, hoi tzion himalti, yoshevet bat Bavel, without getting into details of this pasuk. they have a parallel between Zion, Zion, and Babylonia. So what do you see here? They're at the same level. Rabbi, I can't, we're darshaning so many psukim today that I can't explain to you the simple reading of all these verses, but I do recommend it to figure out what the simple meaning of these verses is. I'm going to just explain them according to the way the Gemara darshans them. Otherwise, we'll never finish the daf. Okay. Amar Abai, Naktina. We know we have a tradition that Bavel lo chazia chevli de Mashiach. Babylonia, another statement to praise Babylonia. They will not have the chevli Mashiach, the pains that are going to come before the Mashiach comes. There's going to be all these terrible things that are going to happen. Talk about it a little bit in tomorrow's daf. So why will Bavel? Well, Tirgama Hutzel de Binyamin. They explained it as the Hutzel of Binyamin, which was, if you remember, we talked about a synagogue once called Hutzel. It was in Megillah, if I remember correctly. The Karole Karnadishes, Shizvaka, they call it the corner of salvation. Okay, this was a holy place, almost like making it like this was like the temple. It was a parallel to the temple in Babylonia. And there, Chavlei Mashiach will not get to. Amal Rabbi Elazar, back to him. He's the one living in Israel. Meitim shebachutz la'aretz einam chayim. He keeps stressing the importance of Israel. We have a bit of a ping pong back and forth. He says, resurrection of the dead. We're now going to talk a lot about this, the resurrection of the dead in the world to come. Resurrection of the dead will not happen to people outside of Israel. Shenema, v'natati tzvi be'eretz chayim. How do they darshan this pasuk? Eretz shetziviyoni ba. Tzvi is normally a deer, but here it means might tziviyon. That means God's glory. Wherever God's glory is, there, Meitah Chayim, Be'eretz Chayim. You know, the cemetery, Eretz HaChayim in Beit Shemesh. It's called that, right? It's from here probably. So right there, Meitah will be Chayim, will be life. She'ein Tzivyoni ba, ein Meitah Chayim. But if I don't have my Tzivyon there, my glory is not in Babylonia or anywhere else, then their dead will not come back to life. Mativ Rabba Bar Mamal, he came up with a question. It says in this pasuk, Yichyu Meitecha, Nivlati, Yikumu. Your dead will wake up and your bodies will rise up. That's a double language. My love, Yichyu Meitecha, are Meitim Shebe'eretz Israel, and Nivlati Yikumun, or Meitim Shebechutz La'aretz. Aren't the two talking about the two places, which means even outside of Israel? And then my Natati Tzvi Be'eretz Chayim. That's Nebuchadnezzar Dichtiv. That's not even talking about us. That's talking about Nebuchadnezzar from Babylonia, who destroyed first temple. Ta'amar Rahmana. I'm going to bring a king upon you who is fast like a deer. And then it has nothing to do with this. Amarle, so this was Abraham Ramal's question. It has double language. It sounds like the dead will rise even in outside of Israel. Amarle, Rabbi Mikra Acher Ani Doresh. So Rabbi Elazar answers him, I have a different pasuk then. You don't like that one? I'll bring up a different. Noten neshama la'am aleha, v'ruach lo chimba. He will give the neshama to aliya, the nation that's there. The nation that's there is the Israel. Ela haktiv nivlati yukumu. What are you going to do with the corpses are going to rise? How benifalimu dichtiv? That's about the according to Abba Mammal, he'll say, according to my mistake, Rabbi Elazar, he'll say it's not Israel outside of Israel, it's adults and nifalim, or kind of people, humans who've made it, and babies who never made it. For Rabbi, they're also going to have tchiyat hametim. Okay, this is, by the way, a possible reason why it's important to have burial places, appropriate burial places for nifalim, for stillborns. For Rabbi Abba Bar Mam, hi noten neshama la'am aleha. What does he do with that pasuk, which is the pasuk that Rabbi Elazar just proved it, that only the nation that's on it? My Avile, we're going to have another not exactly political correct line here. This is not the problematic one. This is saying a non-Jewish maidservant. Okay, remember they're the ones the Canaanite ones who live in your house and basically become the pseudo-conversion. Even they, if they live in Israel, la'am aliya is a reference to the maidservant. How do we know that? Here's this problematic line, which we've had before. La'am aliya, shvu lachem po im hachamor. They take the im and the am. What's shvu lachem po im hachamor? It's by the Akedah Yitzchak. Am hadomeh lechamor. They say the servants are like a nation that's like a chamor, okay, which is not very politically correct to say they're like animals, like the donkeys, but the point is that they're called am, or im is a reference to the am, is a reference to the word am, is even the maidservants that are Canaanite will also come back to life if they're living in Israel. Beruach lo ochim ba, this is a very famous statement. Am Rabbi Yirmiyah ba'arba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, kol ma'alech arba amot be'eretz Yisrael, muftach lo shuban olam haba. Ruach lo ochim ba means you will get life, you will get olam haba if you walk in Israel. So if you walk 4 cubits in Israel, that already gives you zchuyot for olam haba. Okay, this is why people like tiyulim in Israel, walking in the land, right? It's this is often quoted. Ula Rabbi Elazar, tzadikim shebchutz haaretz einam chayim. So Rabbi Elazar was very clear. You don't live in Israel, you don't get resurrected. Well, what about all the righteous people that live outside of Israel? There's lots of them, but they're not going to get resurrected. Am Rabbi Ila, aliyah gilgul, they're going to roll. Their bodies are going to roll to Israel. To which Madkifla Rabbi Abba Rabba, Gilgul, the tzadikim tsarhu. That's very painful to have them roll over. That's crazy. Amar Abaye, so Abaye says mechilot nasalem b'karka. There's going to be these underground tunnels built in order for the tzadikim. Some of the commentators say they're actually going to get up, walk through the tunnels, and then come up from the ground in Israel and be resurrected. Again, much of this stuff is, at least according to many commentaries, is not meant to be understood literally, right? We're talking figuratively, and especially when we get to some very exaggerated stories as coming up. Yaakov says, take me to Egypt, and take me from Egypt and bury me in Maran HaMachpelah. Amar Karna, Dvarim Bego. It's very important things. Yodea Yaakov Avinu shetzadika moraya. He knew he was a tzaddik. If he was going to anyway be resurrected, why was it so important to be buried in Israel? He was worried that maybe he wouldn't have enough merits to get to the mechilot. Same thing with Vayishba Yosef b'nei Israel. He also made the people swear to Joseph that they would bring his bones. Amar Rabbi Chanina Dvarim Bego. Yodea haya Yosef b'atzmo shetzadika moraya. He knew he was a tzaddik. Why did he make them schlep it for so long, for such a long distance? Right? Maybe they won't get the mechilot, right? He was much farther because they went through the desert and all that. Whereas Yaakov, they just brought straight back. Rabbi's brother sent him a letter. He was trying to convince him to make aliyah. So he sends this long letter. You're going to see that there's all sorts of other things in here, which maybe connect, maybe don't. You can try to think about whether they're connected or maybe they're not at all. Anyway, he starts up his letter and he says, and he quotes the whole thing about Yaakov and how important it was for him to get buried in Israel. And basically was trying to say, why don't you come to Israel? Ilfa mosifa dvarim, and Ilfa added things. This is all in the letter, okay? It's a very long letter. Ilfa added some things. There was a guy who was living in Israel, loved this woman, but she was living outside of Israel, and he wanted to marry her. But when he heard this story about Yaakov, Gilgel ba'atzmad yomoto. This isn't the Gilgul he rolled. He was in sorrow all the days of his life because he didn't marry this woman, but he preferred to live in Israel and not leave Israel. Even though you're a big Talmid Chacham, it's not the same to learn by yourself than it is to learn from some other rabbi. I get that. And if you're going to say, I don't want to move to Israel because I don't have a rabbi there, what do you mean? There's Rabbi Yochanan. There's Rabbi Yochanan. He's a great Talmud scholar. You can learn from him in Israel. And if you're not going to, I'm going to warn you some other things. Okay, now this seems totally unconnected. Why is saying this is a very good question? Maybe it has something to do with sitting in the land. I don't know. But anyway, I don't have any really good explanation. But Alter Rebbe Yeshiva, don't sit too much. Yeshiva kasher l'tachtoniot, it causes hemorrhoids. Alter Rebbe Amidah, don't stand too much. Amidah kasher l'lev, it's hard for your heart. Alter Rebbe Halicha, don't walk too much. Halicha kasher l'einayim, it's hard for your vision. Ela shlish b'yeshiva, shlish b'amidah, shlish b'yiluch. It should be balance. Okay, it's all about balance. Kol yeshiva, and then he adds this comment, which they're not going to really understand right away. Kol yeshiva she'eni masmicha, if you're sitting without support, like you're sitting on a bench that doesn't have a back, no amidah no chaymen. Standing is better than that. Amidah sakadatach. Wait a minute, didn't we just say better to stand? What do you mean? Ha'amart amidah kasher l'lev. We said standing too much is bad for your heart. Ela yeshiva she'en masmicha, amidah sheyesh basmicha no chaymen. If you're sitting in a place where you don't have back support, better to stand up against a wall. Okay, I was just at a funeral on Friday where exactly I did that, right? I saw there were no seats. I said, I'll stand next to a wall. It's much more comfortable than, trying to find a spot to sit that's not very comfortable or standing not up against a wall. Okay, why he's saying this, what this has to do, probably it's meant to be symbolic of something, but maybe not. Right? Maybe he's just saying, fine, you're not going to come here, well, I'll give you some health advice. Also, maybe, now I'm just thinking, if you go to Israel, the whole idea is you're going to live a long life. If you're not going to have this long life, that's what he's saying, right? Your sins will be atoned for. If you're not going to atone for your sins, well, I'll give you some health advice so that you can live longer from that perspective. Okay, then he says, continues in his letter, they say that Yitzchak, Shimon, and Oshaya all said the same thing, which is, again, seemingly unconnected. A mule is a combination between a horse, and it's when a horse mates with a donkey. So, halakha is like Rabbi Yehuda b'pradot. There's something called you can't crossbreed animals. Titania, Rabbi Yehuda Omel. Here's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion about mules. Pirda shetva'ah, she's in heat. Aim Rabbi Inala lo sus v'lo chamor elamina. Even though she's partially sus, partially horse, partially donkey, you shouldn't mate her with a horse or a donkey. That would be called crossbreeding. You have to mate her with another mule. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, by the way, in case you didn't know who this Yitzchak was, Yitzchak said Rabbi Yitzchak Nachla, Shimon, so Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, because he said Yitzchak, Shimon, and Oshaya, so they're identifying who they are. But Amar Rabbi Rish Lakish, who's Rabbi Shimon also, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, and Oshaya is the Rabbi Yoshaya Bered. What this idea of the Pirda is, I was thinking about it, maybe it has to do with someone who goes back and forth. Eretz Yisrael and Babel is a bit of a combination, right? And they're saying combinations, right, are not as good as the real thing, and you're never really like in Eretz Yisrael if you don't live here all the time. Maybe that's something he's trying to get at. Okay, next statement, again, back to Rabbi Elazar. So first, Rabbi Elazar said, and that's how we got started on this whole thing, that if you live, metim shebechutz haaretz aren't resurrected. Now he's going to say, amei haaretzot einam chayim. Now, people who live in, people who don't learn Torah, they're called amei haaretz. Remember, they split into the chaverim, the rabbis, and the amei haaretz, people who are not Torah learners. They also will not be resurrected. Shneimar, you're going to see he gets a lot of criticism for this statement. Shneimar, metim bal yichyu. Okay, metim will not live. Who is that? That must be the amei haaretz. Tanya namihachi, metim bal yichyu, yachol hakol. Maybe it means everybody. How do we get that? It's just amei haaretz. Shneimar, because it sounds like maybe there's no tzchiyat metim, because it says dead people will not live. Sounds like there's no such thing as resurrection. Tamaloma rifa'im bal yakuma. What did have they learn rifa'im? The drasha is b'marpeh atzmo midivrei Torah k'shu medaber. Only those who are weakened by not studying Torah. That weakens them, and because of that, they will not be resurrected. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan, it's not just like uncomfortable for you to say such a thing. That means when it weakens them, it's not by idol worship, not by not learning Torah. It's by idol worship. That's what it is. So Rabbi Elazar says, fine, that's how you want to read that pasuk. I'll pull out another one. The way he darshans this pasuk, if you use the tal orot alecha, if your dew is light, basically means the light of Torah. If you use that, the Torah will enlighten you. It will mechayehu. And to him tapil, not milashon lahapil, to make you fall. It actually is to raise you up. But if you don't use the light of Torah, then it won't bring you back to life. But what happened? Even though Rabbi Yochanan didn't have an encounter to this translation, he said he was upset about what he was really bothered by this. He didn't like that he was saying that amei haaretz aren't going to get resurrected. So kevan dechazi kamitztaer. Rabbi Elazar, remember, Rabbi Elazar was a student of Rabbi Yochanan. When he saw that Rabbi Yochanan was upset about what he said, Amar le Rebbe matzati lehem takana min haTorah. I found a solution for them. A very well-known pasuk. Those who stick to God, okay, they cleave to God. Chayim kulchem hayom, will be alive today. How can you cleave to God? What do you mean? God is a powerful fire that will devour you. You can't get close to God. There's no such thing, right? Whether it's fire or not, we all know. You can't physically get close to God. It's describing a physical closeness. Ella, so what does it come to mean? What does it mean, lidabek? Means not by God, but in place of God, we have Torah scholars. So what do you do? Back to the topic of marriage of our Masechet. Anyone who marries off his daughter to a Torah scholar. So you might be an amei haaretz. Marry your daughter to a Torah scholar. Or You invest their money for them. Or you give him some money, you give him charity, or you invite him to your house and help him out financially. As if you clung to the Shekhinah. The exact same thing from a different verse. To love God and to get close to him. Can you cling to the Shekhinah? Same exact three things. I'm not going to retranslate them. If he clung to the Shekhinah. We're now going to have a bunch of statements of him about things that will happen in the future. Tchiyat HaMetim is going to happen in Jerusalem. They're going to come out of the city like grass growing. Ve'ein ir el Yerushalayim. When it says ir, it obviously means Jerusalem. Shenemar v'ganotiat el ha'ir hazot. Okay, because it talks ha'ir hazot, that city is Jerusalem. Therefore, we assume the other city is also Jerusalem. They're going to come out fully dressed, whether this means actual clothes, whether it means the tachrichim, things they're buried in, or their burial shrouds, or whether it means clothed like with all their actions from the past, with, clothed not in a physical way, but in a spiritual way. Come out fully with everything they were before they died. So how do we know this? We're going to learn it from a grain of wheat. Machita, a seed of chita, nikbera aruma, is buried naked. Yotze bekama lebushim, and when it grows, it has all these covers on it. Right? It's covered, the whole grain is covered. Tzadikim that are buried in their clothes, all the more so they're going to come out with clothing. Right? What's our biggest struggle in life? To make dinner every night, make food every day, right? And think about those days, they had to take the wheat and turn it into flour, and what about making their clothes? We're very lucky. We go to stores, we buy clothes. Some people find shopping a big burden and difficult, but it's certainly not the same as making your own clothing from scratch. So in the future, Israel is going to basically grow ready-made food. Cakes are going to come out of the ground, and fine wool clothing is going to come, just appear. Shenema, yi pisat bar ba'aretz. I learned this from the word pisat bar. Bar is grains, and pisat they learn also from pasim, ketonet pasim, like from his cloak of Yosef. Tanu Rabbanan, yi pisat bar ba'aretz b'rosh hariv. Now they're going to darshan this pasuk differently. Amra atidat chita. Also describing the future. In the future, the wheat will titamer kedekel, it will grow like a palm tree, very tall. It will go to the top of the mountains. Shema tomar, you might say, this isn't a good thing. Yesh tzara lekatzro, how are you going to cut it down? Talmud lomar yirash kelevanon piryo, which means Hakadosh Baruch Hu maybe ruach mibeit knaz. I was going to bring a big wind, u'minashva aleha u'mashrat salta. It's going to make it fall, and not only is it going to make it fall, it's going to turn it into fine flour. Okay. And people are going to go out and maybe malo pisat yado. That's the pisat. It's going to bring a full handful. From there, they're going to. That's going to be their sustenance. Continuation of that. Im chelev klayot chita, amra tidah chita shtei kishtei klayot shel shor gadol. The size of, again, these are these very exaggerated stories of the size of the grains are going to be like the size of 2 kidneys of a giant ox. The altitman, don't say this is exaggerated. They're going to tell some other crazy exaggerated story. Share, we know the story happened. Shual kinem belefet. There was a fat who made his dwelling place out of a turnip. Ushkaluhu matzubo shishim litrim belita shel tzipori. And when they measured the lefet without even the insides of it, it measured 60 liters of a litra of tzipori. This is coins. It's very, very, very heavy. But that's obviously some exaggerated story. And now we're going to get into, we were talking about in the world to come, in the future. Now we're talking about right now in Israel. Okay, they're talking about all these stories that happened in Israel. There are these exaggerated stories about all the bounty in Israel. Tanya Amar Rav Yosef, there was a place, he left him 3 branches of chardal, of mustard. One broke off, and just in that one, there were 9 kavs weight of mustard. They had these sukkot where people did their work. They created things, the omanim, the craftsmen, and it basically the one branch covered the whole area. Two ways of reading it. There was a stalk of cabbage that we would use as a ladder, or maybe cut it, we had to climb on a ladder. Now we're going to talk about this. We're back to Olam Haba. Olam Haba is not like this world. You want to make wine, you have to work hard. Ha'olam haba mevi anava, because it says dam einav, one einav. That's one grape. You bring one grape, bekaron or besfina from afar, umenicha bezavit beto, put it in the corner of your house, and it basically turns into a big jug of wine. And that one grape, the branch of it, you can use to cook a whole, right, to make a fire for your whole dish. Okay, these are just exaggerated, right? Each grape is going to give us 30 garbei yayin, 30 jugs of wine. Chomer is 30 gerevs worth of wine. Ki'ata Rav Dimi Amar, my dichtiv. This is a drasha on the bracha of Yaakov in Sefer Vayich, in Parshat Vayechi to Yehuda. Osri legefen iro. Again, I'm not explaining it according to the pshat, just the drasha. The iro they're going to explain is ir, city, even though that's not the translation literally. But gefen iro, ein lecha kol gefen begefen shebe'eretz Yisrael she'ein tzarich ir echad livtzur. You need an entire city to pick the grapes. There's so many of them. Ulishoreka, which also doesn't mean what it's going to mean here. B'nei atono. Shoreka, that's actually soreka. They explain as sin and samach switch schak. Ilan schak is a non-fruit bearing tree. Even though they're not fruit bearing trees, they're going to bear fruits. Okay, they're going to bear a lot of fruits that will be carried by shnei atono. That's why it says atono there. You might say, well, there'll be grapes there, but maybe there won't be wine to be made from it. Okay, the continuation of that pasuk, he's going to wash his clothes in wine. There's going to be so much wine. Maybe it's not red wine, especially if you're going to wash your clothes in it. It's going to be blood, red. Maybe it won't intoxicate. It's going to take you away, meaning get you drunk. Maybe it doesn't have taste. Which literally means your eyes are going to be red from wine, which they're going to darshan tachlili, which is your palate, the shetoamo that touches it says li, omer li, I want it, it's so good. Maybe you'll say it's not good for the elderly, only for the young people. Which they translate as, don't say leven shinayim, ela leven shani, someone who's very old. Pashti described in my Ketubot. What's the simple reading of leven shinayim mechalav? Ki ata Rav Dimi Amar, Amra Knesset Yisrael. It's also really not the simple reading. Amra Knesset Yisrael l'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Jewish people said to God, Ribono shel olam, remoz be'einecha debasim michamra. Show us you love us. That's more important than wine. Va'ach ve'lishinecha, and show us your teeth. How do you show teeth? When you smile, show your teeth. Show us your teeth. Smile down upon us. If you smile down upon us, that's basim michava. That's better than drinking. Right? It's always wine and milk are considered intoxicating, so it's better than milk. I say, Rabbi Yochanan supports Rabbi Yochanan. It's a very beautiful line. Rabbi Yochanan, tov hamalbin shinayim l'chavero yoter mimashkei uchalav. Better than giving your friend milk is to smile at them. Show them your teeth. Smiling at people makes real people feel good. Shneimar leven shinayim l'chalav. I'll call leven shinayim ela libun shinayim, white teeth. Okay, maybe a push for teeth whitening. Okay, Rav Chia bar Ada. Mikre Dardaki de Rish Lakish. Okay, we're going to end with two stories. He was the teacher of the sons of Rish Lakish. He didn't show up for 3 days. Rish Lakish was very upset. Where were you? He left me one vine. And look how many, right? I got 300 clusters from there. But each cluster gave me a whole gerev of wine. Right, it's a measurement. Yom Shini, the second day I did the same thing. This time, shtei eshkolot legarev. It went down a little bit, but still I got 200. I got a gerev for each 2 clusters. Yom Shlishi, same amount. Shalosh eshkolot legarev, but this time it took 3 clusters for a gerev. I had so much wine that I made ownerless half of it because I didn't need it all. So he was trying to say, I was busy in my field. Look at how abundant my fields were. Hamarle, he left the pagard. If you hadn't not shown up for work, you would have had even more. Notice how it went down every day. That wouldn't have happened had you shown up for work. Okay, I'm saying it's more important to learn Torah. But again, it's showing how beautiful it was. Okay, now we get to the famous, we call Israel Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash. We're going to talk about what this is literally. So he was in Bnei Brak, Chazinu Lahani Ize, he saw goats, they were eating under a fig tree. The honey was dripping from the dates. The figs. And the milk was dripping from the goats. And they mixed in together, and there you ended up with Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash. Amar, Hainu Zavat Chalav Udvash. This is the land overflowing with milk and honey. Amar Yaakov ben Dustan, Milud laono shlosha milim. That's the distance from one to the other. Okay, one day I was going. So I'll check something on the translation here. Second. Right, I got up early in the morning and basically I walked in honey up to my ankles from these fig trees. Amar Rish Lakish, Ledidi chazili tavat chalav udvash shel tzipori. You know, so basically again praising the land of Israel. Ledidi chazili tavat chalav udvash shel tzipori. V'avashitzer. Oh, sorry, dvash shel teinim, right? Fig trees. Ledidi chazili tavat chalav udvash shel tzipori. I saw the dvash and chalav, and now we're going to talk about how big this space was where I saw from my own eyes. Zavat chalav udvash. Have a shitzer milin, 16 miles by 16 miles. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, it's a meal, it's a Roman mile, but it's like a mile that we have. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Lididi chazil zavat chalav udvash kol Eretz Israel. I saw all the land of Israel, the zavat chalav udvash area. V'havei k'mibei mirtzeh ad akad tubanaki. Okay, so things that to them means, right? To them meant something from this Beit Michsi to the fortress of Tubanaki. Kav bet parseh or ka uputya shita parseh. Okay, it was 22 parasangs by 6 parasangs, which is 132 square parasangs. They say here is 2,112 square meal, which is a large amount. Okay, so again, we're praising how amazing things are in Israel, even though we did start with saying there might be some issues with moving to Israel. However, they praise how great the land of Israel is, and we praise what will happen in the future, because we got to it, because Tzchiat HaMetim will only happen to people in Israel. From there, we also got to all these amazing things that are going to happen in Tzchiat HaMetim. We're going to have to work a lot less hard to get things. Okay, besides that things will be plentiful, it will be plentiful things that are already ready-made. Okay, with that, we will end today. I will see you all at the Shiur, hopefully Wednesday night. Everything will be up online. There's no Zoom class on Wednesday. The intro for Ayelet Lipson is already up online. I'll send out the link today. And so you can listen to the intro to Nadarim tomorrow morning, and or usual time to learn Daf, and then we'll learn together on Wednesday night. And the Shiur will obviously be up online after for anybody who wants. Wishing everyone a Chodesh Tov.